No, Dave did it.
All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Our jurors and alternates are present in People versus Robert Durst. Mr. Durst is present with Mr. DeGuerin and Mr. Chesnoff. Mr. Lewin, Mr. Bailey, and Mr. Henderson and Mr. Miata are here representing the people. Ladies and gentlemen, today is Will Wyndham's birthday. He defended our country while stationed in Japan during the Korean conflict. He attended UCLA on the GI Bill and graduated Phi Beta Kappa. President of the Honor Society. Here is his gavel, which he gave to me to use in court. He was first in his class at USC Law School, and that was my first law school graduation. When he graduated in 1959, I was 1 month old. He loved the courtroom. He had a successful career in civil litigation, capping his career in the state of Montana as a justice for the Salish Kootenai Tribal Court of Appeal. Will Wyndham is my dad. It's his 89th birthday today. So. I know he's watching.
I know you're worried, Your Honor. I promise you will not be wishing him happy 90th during this trial.
Not during this trial. Thank you. Very good, everyone. Let's thank you. And you may begin your next round of cross-examination of the defendant.
Mr. Durst, you testified that Barry Weiner, you mentioned that he would mow the lawn, trim the trees, and take care of the plants at your house in South Salem. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what did you pay him per month?
I think it was $10 or $12.
Yeah, you testified that you paid him $10 a month to mow.
I should have said a week.
Okay, so that was a misstatement.
Correct.
Although a moment ago you misstated again and said $10 to $12 a month, correct?
No, not correct. Paid him $10 to $12 a week.
So originally you said $10 a month, your first round of testimony, and then today I asked you again and you said $10 to $12 a month, and then you changed it as I was asking my questions and said you meant a week. Is that what happened?
Overruled.
I thought I said $10 to $12 a week.
You would agree, Mr. Durst, that for the work that you described Barry Weiner or Barry Weiner doing, that $10 a month, even in 1982, would be a pretty absurdly low amount, correct?
$10 a month would have been too little.
And you would agree, Mr. Durst, that if you had said $10 a month, that could be something that impeaches your story about Barry Weiner, Barry Weiner, correct?
No, not correct.
Objection. Improper question.
And Mr. Durst, you agree South Salem is a very small town, is that right?
Sure.
And you said that you originally heard about Barry Weiner or Barry Weiner from the mayors, correct?
Not correct.
Where did you hear about Barry Weiner or Barry Weiner?
He came to our house and asked if we wanted him to mow our lawn.
And wasn't it your testimony that the mayors would know who he was?
My testimony was the mayors probably had him mow their lawn too, but I don't know that as a fact.
Would you agree that as small a town as South Salem is, would you agree that it should be pretty easy to find either Barry Weiner or Barry Weiner or someone who knows him? Would you agree in a town the size of South Salem?
I don't know what the question is.
All right, let's talk for a moment, Mr. Durst, about your dig list, what we call the dig list, what you call the digilist. Can you put that up, Mr. Henderson, please? You know what I'm referring to?
I do.
So I'm going to put it up here, and I want to go to, there's an entry at the end of it that you described as saying, in essence, it's going to come up here in a second, but check, and you said the word truck rental. Is that correct?
I don't remember.
Okay, let me show you.
And this is People's Exhibit number 179. 179.
Do you see how you said, the last thing it says, check, car, and it says, and you said trunk, right? And then there's a dash between the trunk, right?
I haven't seen the thing yet.
Okay, so I want you to look at the last line. The last
I
line,
haven't seen the document. It's not on the
oh, okay, you see it, you can see it now?
vaguely.
Okay, let's see if we can zoom up on the last line. Can you see that now?
I see it now.
Okay, that's a check mark, right?
That's a check mark.
And then it says the next word is car, is that correct?
Correct.
And then there's a hyphen, is that right?
Correct.
And the next word you're saying is truck, is that correct?
Correct.
And then there's a slash, is that right?
Yes.
And what is the next word?
Rent.
So let me ask you something. You are familiar, Mr. Durst. You know who Lloyd Cunningham is, correct? Do you know who Lloyd Cunningham is? Let me just save you some time. Do you remember, Mr. Durst, that you were given handwriting reports from expert witnesses?
I've still got this question about
Yeah.
Leader Cunningham. Handwriting reports. I'm just not sure what your question is.
Well, so you remember that Lloyd Cunningham was one of the handwriting experts who wrote the reports regarding the dig note, regarding the cadaver note, et cetera. You remember that, correct?
Your Honor, this
No.
is not evidence before the jury. We object to this in proper course.
I can't
Pardon me?
It's not evidence before the jury. We object in proper cross.
Overruled.
Can you put up the report, please, and we'll mark it as people's next in order?
360, 2 pages.
Hold on, just a minute.
Sidebar.
Yes.
May I continue, Your Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Durst, have you seen, don't put anything up, Mr. Anderson, have you seen the January 19, 2018 report by Lloyd Cunningham? Have you had a chance to look at that report?
I looked at the reports of the handwriting people. I don't remember their names.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you this report. I'm not going to have you look at it now, but I'm going to ask you whether you've had a chance to look at it later, but I am going to ask you the following. You don't need to look at it now, but here's my question to you. Isn't it true, Mr. Durst, that that does not say truck, it says trunk? Isn't that correct, Mr. Durst?
Clarification talking about what's on the screen.
Yeah, on the People's Exhibit 179, you know, he's asking the witness what that word is, what he wrote.
Isn't it true that it says trunk and not truck?
I think it says truck, and whoever wrote that list to the right of it wrote truck also.
Well, so you agree, Mr. Durst, you didn't write the printing that's to the right, correct?
I did not write the printing to the right.
So forgetting about, there's no indication of who wrote that printing that I believe is in evidence this time. Actually, I think it is in evidence. It was stated that it was a person who recovered the document, the testimony was, and they were writing what they thought it was. Do you have any reason to believe that the person who ended up writing that document, here we go, that was written by Tom Hughes, you would agree that you don't know Tom Hughes to be a handwriting expert, correct?
Tom Hughes was a fireman,
Not a handwriting expert, correct?
correct.
So I want to go back to it,
Now, this stipulation is Exhibit
180.
1-8. Thank you.
okay? Isn't it true, Mr. Durst, that that says trunk and not truck?
To me, it says truck.
So when you say to me, if I were to ask you, how certain are you that that says truck and not trunk?
It says truck.
Okay, so your position is you are absolutely certain, is that correct? Or not?
I am certain that word looks like truck.
Well, Mr. Durst, I'm not asking what the word looks like. You wrote that word, correct?
I wrote it.
Okay, so I'm asking you, not what does it look like. I'm asking you, first of all, you've said the word is truck. So I'm now asking you, how certain are you that the word is truck and not trunk?
I'm certain it's truck.
Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that if the word was trunk, that would be a very damaging, again, notation to have there? Do you agree that
Improper.
trunk
hypothetical.
is far worse than truck?
Improper
Overall.
hypothetical.
Overruled.
I don't agree. I don't know how one is worse than the other.
Well, if it says check car trunk, how would that relate to anything else you have on the list?
I did not have the list lawyered. It was something I scribbled before leaving the office. On Friday,
Motion to strike,
January
non-responsive.
29th,
Mr. Durst, that's not the question I asked. The question I asked is, would you agree, Mr. Durst, that if it says check car trunk, that that can't be for putting the sailboat in it, correct?
check car trunk rent. You have to put the sailboat in a truck.
Right, so would you agree, Mr. Durst, that what this could read is check car trunk, and then the hyphen would be that if that doesn't work, rent something. Would you agree that would be a reasonable interpretation of what that could say?
It says check cars hyphen truck /rent. That is what it says.
So listen to my question. Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that looking at it, you have a check, you have car with a hyphen, so the hyphen goes with the word, the next word, which you're saying is truck, correct? And I'm asking if it could be trunk. Why would you put a hyphen between car and truck? Because those would be a choice. Wouldn't you have the slash instead?
You're asking me these questions about this thing I wrote 39 years ago. I can tell you what the writing is, my handwriting, and I can tell you what the different items are referring to. But this thing that you're doing with whether it's truck or trunk or rent, and how that would have something to do with something, I have no idea.
So in the end, what you're left with is you can't say whether it's truck or trunk, correct?
It looks like truck to me.
Again, when you say it looks like, Mr. Durst, that's not the same as you saying the word that I wrote is truck.
I don't remember writing the note. All I can tell you is what it looks like now.
And you would agree, Mr. Durst, that if in fact the word is trunk, would you agree that would be incriminating?
No.
So, Mr. Durst, can you explain, let's assume the word is trunk. You've explained what it means by trunk, so I want you to assume the following. Let's assume that what we have here is it's check car trunk and then slash rent. If that is true, explain to me what that would mean.
Improper hypothetical.
I can't even explain it to myself. I don't remember writing the note. I know that I wrote several different notes to myself for things I wanted to do between February 1st and February 15th. This is one of the notes. When I wrote it, I was probably doing something else at the same time.
Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that a town dump is a place you can get rid of a body?
I have no idea.
Would you agree that a bridge is a place where you could throw a body over?
I guess it would depend on whether it's a big bridge or a little bridge.
Would you agree that dig could imply that you were going to dig and bury a body?
Dig would imply that I'm going to dig and bury a body. No, dig was for digital.
That's not what I asked you. Do you agree? Let's assume the word dig is on the list. If that is the word and it's not dig, would you agree that dig could describe what somebody would do to get rid of a body?
I don't know what somebody would do to get rid of a body.
Would you agree that boat could describe taking a body out on a boat and dumping it in the middle of a water?
I would agree that you could take all these things and come to a zillion different guesses as to what they might have meant.
Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that the note takes on a potentially sinister meaning when it occurs at the time that your wife turns up missing?
Argumentative, objective on the question.
Overall.
It is sinister because you are making it sinister. I'm wondering what you think the other stands for.
Well, I was going to ask you.
I've just said that I don't remember writing it.
How about
I don't know what other stands for.
How about shovel?
Shovel was, I wanted to remind myself to tell Barry to buy 2 snow shovels.
Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that shovel in the same document as dig and town dump, that somebody could come to the conclusion that it involves burying a body? Would that be a reasonable conclusion?
I think very few people would come to that conclusion.
It says shovel or, and then it says, let's assume again that it is check car trunk. Can you explain what check car trunk would mean, if that's what it says or no?
I have no idea.
All right. You also mentioned that Bridge stood for Bridgehampton because you and Kathy were going to rent a place for the month of July. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, it was January 31st when this is happening, and you're in the midst of what you believe is heading towards divorce. Is that correct?
No, I did not think we were going to get divorced.
So, well, you had indicated previously that you were in love with Prudence Farrow, correct?
No,
Oh, you were not in love with Prudence Farrow.
correct.
But you had said that basically you were dating her before Kathy disappeared, you were dating her after, and that Prudence was different from the other women you had cheated on with Kathy, correct?
Correct.
And you also mentioned that you cared tremendously about Prudence, is that correct?
Sure.
And you wanted to be with Prudence, is that correct?
I wanted to be correct.
And you've also said that the way the situation got resolved between Kathy and Prudence, these were your words. You said she disappeared, meaning Kathy, correct?
Correct.
So, Mr. Durst, if the situation is that you are in the midst of having a relationship with a woman that you care very much about, and that you have a problem because Kathy is in the picture, you would agree that Kathy disappearing at that time was helpful to you in your pursuit of Prudence Farrow.
I cared about Kathy a whole lot more than I cared about Prudence Farrow.
So, if you were dating Prudence before and you were dating her after, then why would you have been planning to spend a month in July with your wife?
I don't know why I would not plan on spending a month of July in Bridgehampton with my wife.
Why didn't you write Bridgehampton, and why'd you just write Bridge?
Why didn't I write digital?
Yeah, that's a good question. Tell me.
Why didn't I write snow shovel?
Well, would a potential answer be, Mr. Durst, that you did not write Bridgehampton because it wasn't Bridgehampton, you did not write digital because you were writing dig, and you did not write snow shovel because it wasn't a snow shovel? Would that be a reasonable interpretation?
That
Argumentative.
would only be your,
Argumentative.
Overruled.
So,
that would only be your interpretation. My interpretation was I was abbreviating Bridgehampton, and I wrote bridge to myself because I knew I would know what it meant.
and I'm not
The
asking.
same thing with dig, and the same thing with shovel. It was the middle of a winter, we needed a snow shovel.
And Mr. Durst, you said that you planned to spend the month of July, you and Kathy, in Bridgehampton, correct?
Correct.
Have you ever heard the term, Mr. Durst, never get sick in July?
Never heard that. And we intended to rent a house for the month of July, but I never intended to spend all my time there.
So, Mr. Durst, have you ever heard the term never get sick in July?
No.
Are you aware, Mr. Durst, that residents every year, interns, they start July 1st? So that means that on July 1st, if let's say you get sick and you go to the hospital, the person who's going to be treating you is just starting that year. So my question to you is how is Kathy, who's due to be starting a residency in July, when she's applying to programs in the city, going to be able to spend the month with you at Bridgehampton?
She would commute.
She would commute when?
We intended to rent a house in Bridgehampton. Kathy would spend long weekends at the house, and during the week, she would either stay in the city or commute between whatever hospital she was in and the house in Bridgehampton.
And then she would spend weekends with you, is that correct, in Bridgehampton?
Correct.
Mr. Durst, are you aware that residents, particularly first-year residents, don't work 9 to 5 and they don't work 5 days a week? And that in 1982, there were no limits on how many hours residents could work? Are you aware of that?
I am not aware of that. I heard you say it, but that's the only way I would know of it.
Yeah, and in fact, you weren't aware of any of those facts when you came up with this Bridgehampton story, were you?
I was not aware of any of those facts when I wrote bridge as an abbreviation for Bridgehampton.
All right, you also testified that Kathy was retaking an exam. Is that correct?
And she wanted to retake an exam, yes.
What exam was it?
I don't know the name of it, but as I understood it, all fourth-year medical students took this exam in the fall of their fourth year.
And when was she supposed to retake this exam?
I don't know when the exams were given.
Well, you testified in the context of Kathy was retaking an exam, and you testified with that with respect to the timeline was your understanding that she was going to take it the next week when she went missing?
I don't think she was ready to take it.
Do you know, Mr. Durst, if you can even retake the exam that you're referring to?
She said you could retake the exam and the hospitals would tend to look at your best results.
So you knew all about the details of exams that your wife was taking for her residency match, yet your testimony was you thought Kathy was deferring her residency for a year. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you knew all about her residency plans, yet when I showed you the match list of where she was applying, you had no idea that she had listed as number one, not some suburban program, but a hospital in the middle of the city where she was getting cocaine rehab. Is that correct?
I was very surprised to see that list. Kathy said to me numerous times that she wanted to intern in a major teaching hospital such as Bellevue or Mount Sinai or Montefiore.
So if she was going to do a residency at any of those places, Mr. Durst, she can't drive from Bridgehampton and do that, correct?
I don't know why she couldn't drive from Bridgehampton or take the train or take what they call the jitney.
Well, Mr. Durst, you're aware, what were the hours that you understood that your wife would be putting in as a first-year resident?
I never understood.
So you knew the intricate details of what test she was going to take and whether she was going to retake it, but you didn't know that she was applying for a residency, where she was applying for a residency, or what kind of hours that residency would entail. Is that your testimony?
Objection, misstates the testimony. It's intricate details of all the details. That misstates the
Okay,
testimony.
just a moment. Overruled, it's a question.
Kathy, for whatever the reason was, misled me about where she wanted to do her internship.
All right, Mr. Durst, I want to go now back to, we were talking about your plans at Christmas, and you mentioned that you were aware that Susan was going to spend Christmas, she had plans to be at Christmas with Denny Marcus, correct?
Correct.
And you weren't going to go, correct?
I was going to go if she invited me.
Mr. Durst, you had just gotten married 2 weeks before that, is that correct? You were married December 11th of 2000, correct?
Sure.
Well, Mr. Durst, are you denying that you just got married on December 11th of 2000?
I am not denying that.
So, didn't you have plans to spend Christmas with your new wife, who you had just married?
I had planned to spend New Year's with Debbie Chariton at her Bridgehampton beach house.
So you were not going to spend Christmas with your wife, Debbie, is that correct?
Correct.
Please put up LADA 115924, line 25, to page 76, line 2. This is from your sworn Galveston testimony, Mr. Durst, when you were under oath to tell the truth. I want you to take a look at the line that says, please read it out loud, starting at line 20. Actually, you don't need to do that. You can just read, the question doesn't matter. Just read the answer starting at page 24. Please read it out loud. If it's hard for you, do you want me to just read it, Mr. Durst? Is that easier?
That would be much easier.
Okay, I'll do that. You answered, well, I intended to go out to California. Debbie and I were going to spend Christmas together at her house in Bridgehampton that New Year's like that. Mr. Durst, it unequivocally says that you said you were going to spend Christmas with Debbie in Bridgehampton, correct?
I should have said New Year's with Debbie.
That's not my question. Does it say, Mr. Durst, that you were going to spend Christmas with Debbie?
That's what it says.
And were those your words, or was that somebody else's words that you just agreed with?
My words.
And were you under oath, Mr. Durst, in a courtroom there?
I was under oath.
Do you agree you're under oath today?
I do.
Can you please explain to me, Mr. Durst, how either you were committing perjury during the Galveston trial when you said you were going to spend Christmas with Debbie, or you are committing perjury now when you are saying you were going to be spending Christmas on the staycation week with Susan?
Saying Christmas instead of New Year's, I think would be a very minor perjury.
There's minor, so now you got two minors. So there's perjury, there's minor perjury, then there's minor perjury. Is that your position?
Yes, the difference between saying Christmas and saying New Year's is very minor.
Well, Mr. Durst, you agree, though, you specifically said that you were going to spend Christmas with your wife, and you would agree, Mr. Durst, that at the time you said it, you knew that you had flown back on the 23rd from San Francisco to JFK, and you needed to explain why you were only taking a 4-day trip. And you would agree this explanation would explain, well, I had to get back to spend Christmas with my wife, correct?
All I see is that instead of saying New Year's with my wife, I said Christmas with my wife. And I will say that that is the most minor perjury that could possibly occur.
Okay, I want to ask you about another statement that you made. This is going to be starting at lines 21 and 22. So, you were asked, so what did you do? You respond, eventually, I flew back to New York and I had Christmas with Debbie at Bridgehampton. Did you say that?
I said that.
Is that a lie?
That was a lie.
Is that perjury?
That is perjury.
Is that minor perjury, minor perjury, or big giant perjury?
I did not end up having Christmas with Debbie or having New Year's with Debbie.
Yes, you were murdering Susan in Los Angeles right before that, correct?
Object.
Overruled.
No, that's not correct.
So, Mr. Durst, you said before it was just a misstatement when you said Christmas. Well, now you're saying Christmas again, and you've now admitted that this was not a misstatement, this was an intentional lie, correct?
It was a misstatement. I should have said New Year's.
So, this is also a misstatement. This is not an intentional lie. Is that correct?
This. What is the this we're working on now?
We're talking about your statement, eventually I flew back to New York and I had Christmas with Debbie at Bridgehampton. That's an intentional lie, correct?
That's an intentional lie.
And it's an intentional lie because you wanted to have an alibi to explain, number one, correct, why you only took a 4-day trip out to California, and number two, you wanted to make sure that you were back home with Debbie so that you were not a suspect in Susan's murder, correct?
No, not correct.
All right. You also agree, Mr. Durst, that the reason that you perjured yourself in Galveston was because you believed that telling the truth would make things worse for yourself, correct?
No, not correct.
So why did you lie? The last line I just showed you, why did you lie when you said you spent Christmas with Debbie? You've said it's an intentional lie, it was not an accident. So why did you lie?
I don't remember.
Well, Mr. Durst, wouldn't you agree that that lie was something that benefited you in that case?
What case?
Your murder trial of Morris Black in Galveston.
I don't know that it benefited me at all.
Well, Mr. Durst, would you agree that if you had told the truth, that I was down in Los Angeles right before Christmas finding Susan's dead body, that that would have been harmful to your case in Galveston?
The judge had ruled that neither side could bring up Susan Berman's death.
Mr. Durst, we went through that yesterday. If you recall, that's a lie that you told yesterday when you were impeached by the actual statements in the trial about Susan Berman's murder being asked by your lawyer. Do you recall that?
No.
All right, let me go on. All right, let's talk about the logistics of your trip to California starting on December 19th. You agree that you arrived in Trinidad on December 19th after flying into San Francisco and taking a commuter flight to Eureka. Is that correct?
Correct.
Did you have your cell phone with you?
I thought I had my cell phone with me, but when I got to the United Express terminal, the cell phone and the car keys and the book that I've been reading on the flight from New York to San Francisco were gone.
And Mr. Durst, you would agree that the only evidence that that statement is true is you saying it is, correct?
What evidence could there possibly be? We reported it to United's Lost and Found, and the lady said it's highly unlikely that the cell phone would be returned to Lost and Found.
Do you have the documents from United Lost and Found showing that you reported your phone missing?
I never saw a document.
So let me repeat again. In order to believe that you left your phone on the plane, would you agree the jury would have to believe you?
Yes.
You also testified under penalty of perjury in Galveston that you stayed in Trinidad for the next 3 days or so, correct?
I don't know what I testified to.
Okay.
3 days would be 19th, 20, yeah, that's correct. 3 days.
That's what you testified to, correct?
Correct.
That was perjury, again, correct?
That was not perjury.
Well, Mr. Durst, you arrived on the 19th, and then you drove down to Garberville, you say on the 20th, correct?
Correct.
And you said you stayed for the next 3 days in Trinidad, but that doesn't include the trip to Garberville, does it?
I didn't stay in Garberville. I went to Garberville to buy marijuana, and I went back to Trinidad.
Okay. Where did you sleep the night of December 19th when you got there?
At Diane Boucher's house.
So let's talk about your activities on December 20th. You said you dropped Diane at the hospital, is that correct?
Correct.
Which hospital?
There's only one in Humboldt County, Humboldt County Hospital.
Did you attempt to get records of Diane Boucher's alleged stay at the hospital?
No,
Wouldn't that be something that you would have wanted to do to at least establish that she even had surgery?
I have no reason to establish that that she needed surgery.
Well, Mr. Durst, she's your alibi, and as you pointed out, she is dead. So would you agree that even if it did not prove that the rest of your story was true, at least it would show, if you got records, that, hey, she at least had surgery? You would agree to that, right?
No, I would not agree to that. You're making it seem like I planned these things in advance, knowing I was going to be arrested and charged. I had no reason to get documents from the hospital.
Mr. Durst, have you tried to get documents from the hospital since you came up or remembered this interaction with Diane Boucher?
No,
Is there something preventing you from trying to do so?
no, there's nothing preventing me from trying to get documents from the hospital.
And can you explain what exactly was this surgery she was having?
It was a procedure, and I assume it had to do with her ovaries.
What makes
Because she died of ovarian cancer in 2005. But I don't know that. She always just told me she's got in trouble with her stuff.
Are you sure that that's how Diane Boucher died?
She shot herself, yes.
Okay, so didn't you testify, Mr. Durst, that she died of ovarian cancer? And then I asked you, by the way, you didn't know necessarily when I asked you the question that I knew how she died, did you?
Well, if you know how she died, you know she killed herself.
Yes, I do, but that's not what you said. You responded, she died of ovarian cancer. You said it 2 days ago, and you said it again right now. Did she die of ovarian cancer, or did she die by putting a gun to her head and pulling the trigger?
The reason she put the gun to her head and pulled the trigger was because the chemotherapy for the ovarian cancer was too painful to live.
Mr. Durst, you have some experience in homicide and cause of death, correct?
Yes.
So was Diane Boucher's cause of death, was it ovarian cancer or was it gunshot wound to the head?
The cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head, but she shot herself in the head because of the ovarian cancer.
So when you were asked, why didn't you say, hey, listen, my friend Diane Boucher is dead. She killed herself many years ago. Why did you instead say she died of ovarian cancer when that's not what happened?
I think she did die of ovarian cancer.
You said twice, Mr. Durst, under oath, literally the words, Diane Boucher died of ovarian cancer. Do you not recall that testimony?
I do recall it, and sitting here, if I'm describing how Diane Boucher died or what killed Diane Boucher, everything goes back to ovarian cancer.
Okay, so December 19th, you sleep over at Diane Boucher's house. And what do you do on the 20th? Describe your activities. Detailed, as much as you can remember, please.
I think we left Trinidad around 8 o'clock in the morning. We would have gotten to Eureka, where the hospital is, in 15 or 20 minutes. Then I went to Bank of America and we drew $9,500. Then I drove for 45 minutes to an hour south to Garbersville.
Let me stop you. When you dropped off Diane Boucher, what was the plan supposed to be with her?
Since I did not have my cell phone, we decided that she would call my answering service and leave a message as to if I should, when I should pick her up.
But you're going to be at least 45 minutes at a minimum away from her, correct?
Correct.
Well, so a woman is having surgery, and she's going to call you when she's ready, and she's just going to sit there waiting for you for 45 minutes or an hour?
Well, I knew she'd be there for a good 3 or 4 hours, is what she said.
Didn't you say earlier that it was only a couple-hour surgery?
Couple of hours, 3 hours,
Well, Mr. Durst,
4 hours.
so isn't it true that right now, in response to my question, you deliberately doubled the amount of time the surgery would take because you realized your timeline didn't work? Isn't that correct?
No, that is not correct. I did not double the amount of time.
So you took the $9,500 out to go buy a pound of weed, is that correct?
Correct.
Would you agree, Mr. Durst, that you have been aware now for many years that it can be proven that at approximately 3 p.m. on December 20th that you made collect calls from a payphone in Garbersville? You're aware of that, correct?
The payphone calls I made were from Garbersville.
And you're aware, Mr. Durst, that those calls, you knew that they can be proven. In other words, you can't say I wasn't in Garberville because you know that the Galveston DA had the records and we have the records, correct?
I have no reason not to say that I was in Garbersville.
So, Mr. Durst, you're aware that the calls in Garbersville occur around 3 p.m., is that correct?
I remember it was in the afternoon. I would not deny that it was at 3 p.m.
Well, you dropped her off at 8. Originally you said it's going to take 2 hours. Now you say it's going to take 3 to 4 hours. You're all the way down in Garberville at 3 p.m. That is 7 hours after you drop her off. How can you explain that?
That's how long it took.
Well, Mr. Durst, isn't it true that you forgot what time the calls were made in Garberville? So you were unaware when you made the story up that your timeline wasn't going to work because your calls are 7 hours after you're dropping her off for a 2 or 3 or 4 hour appointment. You forgot, didn't you?
I think you just made about 18 misstatements. Nothing you are saying that I agree with.
Well, okay, let's break it down. You agree, Mr. Durst, that you have said that either her appointment, the surgery, was supposed to be 2 hours or was supposed to be 3 or 4 hours. Is that correct?
Correct.
You dropped her off at 8, correct?
Correct.
That means that she would be ready to go no later than noon, correct?
She would be... The timing just doesn't work like that.
Wait, what do you mean timing doesn't work like that? What does that even mean?
The message she left me on the answering service was to pick her up at 4 o'clock.
Well, Mr. Durst, you wouldn't have known that. So she left you got that message at 3 o'clock when you checked your messages, correct?
Correct.
For all you knew, she'd been waiting after having surgery for hours for you to come pick her up, correct?
Correct.
Does that make sense, Mr. Durst?
That's what happened.
So you would agree that it doesn't make any sense, but that's what happened. That would have to be your response, correct? I can't explain it, but that's what happened. Is that correct?
I don't think it's the kind of thing you explain. She told me that the procedure would take 3 or 4 hours, and then she called and left a message to pick her up at 4 o'clock.
Okay, let's talk about this pound of weed you're buying.
Let's talk about it after the break. It's a little past 10:30, so 10:45-ish. 10:45, please do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with the case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case.